So three Nigerian banks, GTBANK, Sterling, and Access, have announced plans to restructure their existing operations into a holding structure, while GTBANK and Access have provided some insight into their expanded Pan-African footprints in East, Central, and Southern Africa. Today, Access Bank announced operations in Mozambique, looking to become the country's seventh largest lender, while planning to buy 49% equity stake in South Africa's Growbank Limited. The idea is to position for intra-Africa trade and meet the needs of multinational clientele. My guest on this tonight is Joshua Odebisi, a banking analyst at VETIVA Capital Management. Good evening, my friend. What's going on here? Nigerian banks are on fire. Talk to me.
Yes, Nigerian banks are definitely adopting a new strategy. I think it's very exciting that those three banks that you mentioned have all decided that the best way forward is to pursue a bit of a Holdco structure that will help them to sort of reorganize their operations and hopefully extract more profits, from better operations overall across the board. Now, this is all obviously different across the different banks. I think GT's structure, although they do have businesses outside of Nigeria, it's more a strategy to sort of implement a better structure, a better structure that helps them to derive the most value from their different business units. So you talk about your digital banking, and then their lending, and there's also talks of them, planning to buy a PFA. So this would give them, positions in different areas of financial services that, just go beyond your ordinary lending. While your Access Bank, they're looking to just continue to grow and, enter different markets. I think it's an interesting strategy. Not many banks are looking to, really enter the South African market at this point due to obviously the state of their economy and the fact that that market is sort of in a different growth trajectory to the rest of Africa. But like you mentioned, the AFCTA is part of the reason for that, because obviously once all the borders are sort of open and there's a lot more intra-Africa trade, then the bank that is present in the most markets is likely to make a significant strides in terms of profitability and being able to cater to different markets. Meanwhile, Sterling Bank's own strategy is more similar to your GTBank strategy, with having their different business units. Obviously, there's been a lot of emphasis on the digital aspect, on sort of expanding that and making it its own business. So when they restructure, they'll obviously be able to engage in a more independent strategy, so to speak, while also taking advantage of some cross-selling. So any clients they get from one unit can also be cross-sold into other units, so they can onboard people from their digital bank, and then link them up to your lending options or facilities, or maybe investment options or things like that. And that's part of what makes the Holdco structure so appealing for these banks.
Well said. But when you look at Sterling Bank, if we start to take these banks one after the other, how is this news being received within your analyst community, all of them put together right now? Let's start from there.
Well, I'd say that obviously anytime a bank adopts a new strategy, it's exciting for us analysts, because we will be happy to see once the change has actually happened. We would be happy to see what kind of reflection it has on their income statements and their performances. But I think we can definitely expect, as time goes on, for obviously for profitability to improve. That's if their strategy is correct. I think the best thing we can do is take an example from Stanbic IBTC, who have a similar structure, and then you will see that if you look at their financials, their non-banking subsidiaries are the best performers in terms of the whole group. And in fact, their bank is not profitable at all, but the rest of their subsidiaries are very profitable and drive a lot of income for them, almost more than 50% of their income. So depending on what kind of strategy your GT Bank or your Sterling Bank adopts, we could have a similar situation where these banks, non-banking, non-traditional banking activities are bringing in more revenue and making more profits for the bank than your lending and your interest income.
I'm looking at the speed at which the Godwin Emefiele is signing off on all this Holdco structure. It looks like the central bank is happy with this development.
Well, yes, I mean, so there's been talk for some time now about, plans to also raise the capital requirements for the banks, for the different tiers, which would, cause another round of change within the market, within the industry. However, that hasn't come to fruition, but I think that this is sort of a preemptive strategy in order to ensure that, there's maximal growth, in order to minimize the need for maybe some combinations down the line if the CBN does intend to pursue, raising the capital requirements for each tier of bank. But overall, I think he's just more happy that these banks are being proactive and, taking very bold strategies and not just resting on their laurels, because, the Nigerian banking space has been, not to say immune, but very, very robust in light of COVID-19.
I get that. When you talk about, because the governor spoke about, I guess it was last year also, when he says within a 5-year period, there will have to be some changes, as it were, in terms of capital base and whatever. So it looks like these folks are always smart, by the way. Right. I know. Let's talk a little bit about Access Bank, because this bank seems to be aggressive. You've seen consolidation with Access Bank going into consolidating stronger in Rwanda, in East Africa, then now it's going to Mozambique, where you have a $20 billion LNG project.
Right. So I think what we would term this as is aggressive expansion. And aggressive is definitely the right word to use when talking about Access Bank. They've been very aggressive in their growth strategy. I think it's been very much inorganic growth, obviously by acquisitions and mergers and entering new markets that way. I think obviously they've decided that the best way to become the biggest bank in Africa is to be in as many viable markets and to almost turn themselves into a sort of household name and be the first option for your average African. If they have a simple, even 30% of Africa with an Access Bank account, that's immense levels of revenue, immense levels of deposits. They'll be able to lend across different markets, and they'd also be sort of immune to any kind of foreign exchange fluctuations in one market, because they wouldn't just be fully focused on just the Nigerian market, so to speak. They would have possibly markets across Southern Africa, East Africa. So I think it's a good strategy. All that time will tell whether or not these banks are able to, especially Access Bank, is able to, fully take advantage of being in all these markets and not getting too big too quickly, because we've seen that happen before. Not per se in Africa, but definitely in the West, we've seen banks grow too big too fast and end up going under. But hopefully that won't happen with Access Bank.
So when you look at this Pan-African structure, and if you look at Access Bank, for example, already in Zambia, in Mozambique, and now going into under the belly into South Africa. So you look like within the SADC region, talking about intra-Africa trade, being there for the... Does it look like this is positioning for the CFTFT? January 2021 is the new deadline for intra-Africa trade, and as you know, the payment system will be very key for this particular intra-Africa trade. If you are not there, then you are not there.
Right. Well, I think you're absolutely right in that sense. If you're not there, then you're not there. And I think, obviously you and Herbert Wigwe think alike, and that's the reason why they've entered the South African market, because the South African market on its own is not really, you don't see a lot of banks or a lot of companies, from other African countries entering into South Africa, because South Africa is on a different growth trajectory and the economy is not doing absolutely great at the moment. But it is definitely a hub for Southern Africa.
I agree with you. It's for trade, because if you're going into Zimbabwe, you're going to Zambia, all the way to Mozambique and elsewhere, you're going, South Africa is the destination. That's where you land at the OR airport. And then if you're not there in that city, I don't think you were there. And that looks like a very smart move, by the way, for them. So, how will this impact shareholders in just 1 minute? Do you think this is good news?
Oh, absolutely. I think all the shareholders have already been, optimistic on Nigerian banks. Any long-term shareholder should be lapping up all of these banks at the moment. As soon as GT introduce that Holdco structure, I do believe that they'll see massive gains. Same thing with Access Bank, except theirs is, a different strategy, so to speak. Sterling Bank also will definitely see a lot of gains. It's also ironic because First Bank were one of the first to, have this Holdco structure with all the FBN Quest and the other subsidiaries. But these days, you hear management talking about, changing strategy and going back to core banking.
Would you want to see the elephant go across Africa, go safari, and not just stay in Lagos?
Well, I think that's completely out of their strategy, but who knows?
Let's see who knows tomorrow.
Right.
Thank you so much, Joshua Odebisi from VETIVA Capital, head of the banking analyst team there. Thank you so much, and see you next time.